Big news out of the heartland state of Kansas this week. So yesterday, August 2nd,
Who knew?
Kansas really impressed. I tweeted out, "Let's go Kansas." We got to get that hashtag going because the people of Kansas really shocked the world by voting overwhelmingly against a constitutional amendment, meaning to the state constitution, that would allow the legislature to restrict abortion. If that sounds like a mouthful, it's because it is. And it's not any kind of conspiracy theory, I don't think, to believe that it was made deliberately confusing. So let me just put that in very simple terms. There was a referendum brought to the people of Kansas on whether or not to keep abortion access in their state constitution. And the people of Kansas voted overwhelmingly to keep abortion access essentially codified in their state's constitution. And this was not a close vote. 58 voted pro-choice and 41 voted anti-choice. That's how I'm describing the vote, because it turns out voting no was voting yes on reproductive rights, so it gets very confusing. Basically,
I think what they didn't take into account, the people who put forward this ballot proposal, was the hell, without legal abortion, I would have had to marry Merlene vote.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, right.
They didn't take that into account.
I mean,
I would have had to move into that trailer with her folks if we hadn't been able to get that abortion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, these kinds of issues just affect people in such a fundamental way that it's one thing to talk like a God-fearing Christian who wants to stop them baby killers from killing them babies. It's another thing when you actually have a chance to make these policies reality. This is what I said as soon as the SCOTUS opinion leaked, was that this could have the effect, believe it or not, of moderating the Republican Party in the long term. Obviously, that has not happened in the short term. But what happened in Kansas was the people of Kansas, deep red state Kansas, which voted for Donald Trump against Joe Biden 60-40. They saw Roe v. Wade overturned. They saw on the news that 10-year-old girls were having a hard time getting the care they needed after being raped. They saw on the news that there were 6-week bans now being put into place that were being upheld, whereas most people don't even know they're pregnant at 6 weeks. And they said, holy shit, we can't live like this. And the first chance that any state had in the country to actually do a reality check when it comes to these kinds of policies voted overwhelmingly to keep abortion legal. And who knew Kansas would be the abortion capital of the heartland, but it is.
Well, I heard when this came in, Joy Reid was in the Rainbow Room. She started throwing cocktail glasses. God damn it! This fucks the whole narrative about the red states.
Well, yeah, I mean, it definitely...
How am I going to go on the air and claim they all have one opinion, that they're all these backward troglodytes, Christian rednecks? This blows my segments for the next 7 shows.
Well, yeah, certainly does. Certainly does. I mean, it was to a point where, I mean, most of the counties in the state voted anti-choice because they're very rural counties, but all around, like, Topeka, Wichita, the cities, and even the surrounding suburbs of those cities voted overwhelmingly to keep reproductive care codified in the state constitution. Now, when we say codified in the state constitution, we don't mean that, the founders of Kansas wrote this into the Constitution whenever Kansas became a state. What happened was the Supreme Court of Kansas ruled in 2019 that the state constitution guaranteed reproductive rights. And so this was a ballot measure to amend the Constitution to explicitly strip that protection, which would allow the state legislature, which is, of course, overwhelmingly Republican, to then pass a law similar to the kinds of laws that surrounding states like Texas, Missouri, Oklahoma have already passed. And the people said, no, we're not going for that. And Michael Moore made a great point. He put out a sort of short form podcast in response to this. And this was exactly what I was thinking, because he talked about how the Democrats have been so utterly useless in defending reproductive care. And this was an instance where it just fell to the people to vote yes or no. They weren't voting for elected officials to go to bat for them to defend abortion rights. This was a ballot measure. This was a referendum. You could either have reproductive rights in your state or you can't, and the people voted overwhelmingly for them. And so, that is a very, very inspiring thing, and it was a great victory for Kansas, and a real good sign that people in this country are willing and ready to fight back against this, because it has to be fought back against, and the people have to do it themselves. One other point that I'll make here is that this was put to the ballot during the primary date, not the November general election date, which is very unusual, but that was done deliberately because Republicans figured
the most activist people.
Exactly. And Republicans thought that since there are way more Republicans in the state of Kansas than there are Democrats, that Republican turnout on primary day is going to be way higher because a lot more people vote in Republican primaries in Kansas than in Democratic primaries. What they weren't counting on, and the other really fascinating thing here, is that because this was a ballot measure, independents could go and vote for this referendum. And the independent vote swayed extremely heavily for reproductive rights. And so that was the one thing they did not think of, and it bit them in the ass. And good on them.
In the end, it's one of those things that it was a shocking result, but it makes total sense in hindsight. The majority of people, including Republicans, are pro-choice. So, of course, nobody wants this. It is a real problem for the Republicans. They are very much the dog that caught the car.
Right.
You pushed it and you pushed it and you finally got it. Now you've actually done just about the only thing that might be able to rescue the repulsive Democrats from themselves. I've been watching the conservative media try to spin this, and it's just not working. It's really not working.
Well, what are some of the things you heard? Because I haven't tuned into any of that since this happened.
They know it's an unpopular position. They're trying to give it look at this liberal idiot protester with their purple hair and their lib values. They're trying to give it that treatment. They're trying to tar it that way. They're trying to treat it the way they treat a story about a transgender woman winning a weightlifting contest, liberals gone mad, liberals gone crazy, or owning the libs. Like, they're trying to paint it that way, but it doesn't work because the target is one that most people don't think is crazy. Right? It's not, it just doesn't play to be like, oh, and today this pro-choice activist introduced legislation to make abortion legal all the way up to 6 months.
Yeah. Right.
Whoa. Like, it just doesn't work the way video of teachers telling all the children in the class that they're racially defined. You can get a lot of content out of that. But talking about the crazy pro-choice people, they're trying to do exactly the same thing, and it just doesn't work because it's not that you're not on the side of popular opinion here. You just sound stupid when you start trying to treat it that way.
Yeah, and this is also not the kind of thing that exists mostly in people's imaginations, right? So the specter of critical race theory is very powerful politically because it's this scary thing that, some people do encounter, but most people don't. Most people can just sort of picture in their head, oh my God, imagine.
There are very few schools you're going to go to where this is an issue.
Yeah, right.
There are
exactly.
certain districts where, yes, if you're in LA County, if you're in San Francisco County, if you're in New York City, you'd be hard pressed to find a lot of other places around the country where you're going to
Right, exactly. So like where right-wing media is most popular, which is in red areas, this is really just something that exists in TV world, right? The idea that your child is going to be indoctrinated to believe that because she's white, she is, this like oppressor. That's something that like the average Fox News viewer only sees that and experiences that through Fox News. It doesn't actually happen to their kid.
Right.
Unwanted pregnancies happen to everybody.
Right.
Pregnancies that maybe start out wanted and don't end up being wanted because of whatever life circumstance or an illness or whatever. This happens to everybody. This is not just some like TV culture war abstraction. And so that hits a little different, right? To the point where when it comes to a vote, hey, do we want this option on the table? Yes or no? 60% of the people of Kansas are still going to vote yes.
Basically, to the best way to describe it is they're trying to use the ground that they've already built with their audience on owning the libs and hating the libs and liberal elites and putting this in that box.
Right.
And it just doesn't belong in that box. This is not a liberal elite thing. This is not a rarefied opinion of college educated people. This is a broad opinion held by an overwhelming majority of the American public, including people who consider themselves Republican and conservative.
Please clap.